Okay, so as you can see, we have our notch for our picture frame, which is 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch wide. We have our cove bit here, cove molding, which leaves us with a little over 1/8 of an inch, about 3/16, somewhere in there. That matches the against the picture. And then we have our round over with a notch on the back side and a very slight bevel on the back. So the next step in the process is I just want to do some sanding on this before I cut the 45-degree bevels on these, or 45-degree miters on these. So that's what I'm doing right now, do some sanding. Okay, so I just want to explain a little bit about, I'm going to cut the miters on these now. The main thing you have to know is exactly what size picture is going to be going into your frame. Obviously that's critical. So what I have here is I have a piece of backer board. It's 3mm MDF or hardboard of some type. I buy it here locally. This is what I put my paintings on. So this is what's going to go into the frame. So when I set up my miter cutting jig on the table saw, I'm going to use this to make sure they're set to exactly that. And of course, we're setting that measurement to the inside of this notch where the picture frame is going to sit. That's our crucial measurement. Everything is based on that. So let's go over to the table saw and I'll show you how I set that up. Okay, so I hope you can see that I actually have a line on here in pencil that is 1/4 inch away from this fence. I just double checked with my frame to confirm that that is in fact the depth of my notch. So the idea is I'm going to measure from where the blade intersects with that line, that 1/4 inch line, to my stop using my backer board. So putting the backer board on the line, I'm just going to move that back until it intersects with that line. Now, if anything, you want to err on the side of being slightly larger. The distance from my guide along that line that's 1/4 inch away to the blade is about 1/16 of an inch too long. That is for the short side. I have to cut the short sides on my frame first and then the long sides. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so I've compared the dimensions and I'm good to go. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to cut the other one and then we'll set up to cut the long sides. So I got all my miters cut. I'm just doing a test fit to make sure that my backer board actually fits inside. Looks pretty good. Okay, so the next step in the process, I'm just going to do a little bit of light sanding where I cut my miters with some 120 grit sandpaper, and then I'm going to set up to assemble the miters. Okay, so I've got my miter jig set up. I have my first two pieces of my frame put in there. As I explained in another video, when I made my stretchers, I just bought this frame locally, and you can get them, I think, at pretty much any hardware store. So the idea is, I want this surface to be flush and perfect. I'm not so much worried about the underside. I can sand that a bit. There's a little bit of tear out here. Not worried about too much about that either. It looks pretty good. So the idea is, I'm going to put glue on it, and then I'm going to put a 2-inch brad nail right through into here. Now you might say, yes, but isn't that going to be visible? Yes, it is, depending on how you stain it. If you stain it clear, it will definitely be visible. There'll be a little dot there. There's two things. In this case, I'm probably going to be staining this quite dark, maybe even black, in which case you won't see it at all. Of course, if you paint the frame, then it's not going to make any difference either. The other thing is I'm going to put the nails in the top and the bottom. So that's the least likely place that you're going to see them. You're not going to see it from the edge. Most people don't hang their frames, pictures rather, on the wall where you can see either the top or the bottom. So that's my plan. So let's get to it. So the glue has dried on my frame, and I've just put a little bit of wood filler where I put the nail holes in. I ended up putting 3 nail holes in to hold this. It's a little bit larger frame, but those will cover up quite nicely with wood filler, and I'm going to stain it dark. I did check it for square, and it is almost perfect. The only thing I noticed was on the back side especially, the edges are not even. I was focusing on the front side to get those even, and I think this is a result of me using the table saw to bring it to the final thickness. Maybe a little bit of over sanding on the corners, I don't know. But I'm going to use the sander now on that just to take that down. One word of caution when you're sanding these corners, I'm going to be using my orbital sander here with 120 grit sandpaper, very carefully, trying to maintain it level. The worst thing you can do is take sandpaper and go back and forth like this. There's a danger of wearing a mark on the corners here, which will be almost impossible to get rid of. So that's the next process. I'm going to set that up. So that's it for my 120 grit sandpaper. I have some 180 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to touch up the entire thing. But I've gotten the surfaces all level, and they're looking really good. Okay, so I finished sanding with 180 grit sandpaper. Everything looks really good. One thing I will note before I proceed is I've taken a very small wood bit and I've drilled a hole right up in there, about a quarter of an inch, well, not even a quarter of an inch, less than a quarter of an inch deep. This is going to come in handy when I spray the frame with a lacquer, and you'll see what I mean by that later. And it won't be visible at all. It's just a very, very shallow hole. The next thing I've done, of course, I've cleaned it completely. I've wiped it down with a paint thinner, a solvent, and that way it removes all dust, all sawdust. Now what I've got here is I've got a stain, dark black stain, I'll put a link in the description to the product I'm using, and of course a rag. Now the secret with stain is you put a lot more on than you think you need. You got to get it into all the little cracks and crevices. Then you can have a clean rag to wipe off the excess. But the idea is to get it into all the cracks and crevices. And I will probably have to stain it twice just to make sure it's completely dark black. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so that is my first coat of stain. So all we can do now is let that dry, and when it's dry, I'm going to apply another coat. Talk to you in a bit. So what I'm going to do here is on this frame, I'm just taking a little bit of 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to go around the edges. Now I've already done quite a bit here. The idea is to just give it a bit of a distressed look. So I'm just touching it along the edges, particularly on the edges here, here, and around the back edges, a little bit on the corners as well. So I've just taken the sandpaper and I've just lightly, very lightly, sanded some of those edges. The idea is to make it look like it's a little bit worn, a little bit older, and you can always fix it afterwards. If you've taken too much off, just go back over it with some more stain. So the next step in the process is to apply a polyurethane based finish. I'm using a product called Meditech varnish. It's a product available here in Ecuador. I will put a link in the description to other products you can purchase online. It just has to be a polyurethane varnish. I'm going to be applying it with a sprayer. This is a really inexpensive sprayer, but it works really good for what I'm doing. Now you could put it on with a brush, no problem. You just have to be careful to not have any streaks. That's the reason I put it on with a sprayer. It's so much easier, and it dries quite quickly as well. The only thing is you have to dilute the polyurethane finish, the varnish, with a paint thinner. The consistency is slightly more viscous, slightly thicker than water, probably the consistency of milk, let's say. Okay, so I'm going to set up the camera and we're going to spray it right away. Okay, so that concludes our video on how to make a simple frame for your paintings. In another video, I'm going to explain a little bit more about the matting and the glass, which I have removed actually at this point for clarity. So if you'd like to see more videos like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and stay tuned to Passion for Life Gallery. Thanks for watching.